Hello everyone, and welcome to Shell Point Today for Monday, July 11th. I'm Dan Filgreen. On today's show, we will learn about a Coffee with a Neighbor presentation with book author and Shell Point resident George Haines. Professor Adrian Kerr will discuss his academy class on Istanbul, and with today being the 5-year anniversary of the Shell Point call center, we're taking you behind the scenes for an in-depth look at their operations. But first, we'd like to remind you of another 5-year anniversary that is being celebrated this week. It's the anniversary of the Community Thrift Store. You can save 50% off of everything store-wide starting tomorrow through this Saturday. Come and enjoy 5 days of daily drawings for prizes and pick up some great items at a super savings of 50%. The thrift store will be open from 9 a.m. till 4 p.m. from tomorrow through Saturday. Tomorrow is also the time for another Do You Know Your Neighbor event. Known for its 630-foot Gateway Arch, which honors the 19th century explorations of Lewis and Clark, the city of St. Louis, Missouri will be this month's honored guest. If you've lived in, traveled to, or have an interest in the city known for blues music and great barbecue ribs, then come join us in the Social Center tomorrow at 2:15. Retired lawyer and former economic advisor to the UK government, Thomas Terrell, will present Session 1 of the Transatlantic Alliance Academy class on Wednesday. This first session deals with the aftermath of World War II and a better understanding of the people of Europe and their desire for a closer political union between them and the nations of the continent. Topics that will be addressed include the beginnings of today's European Union, the EU, the European Free Trade Area, the European Economic Community, the collapse of the Soviet Union, and the expansion of the EU into Eastern Europe. Be sure to sign up for this class that takes place Wednesday in the Grand Cypress Room of the Woodlands at 10 a.m. George Haines of Lakewood loves to write, and he has taken writing his memoirs to the next level. What begins as his true life experiences suddenly expands to become enjoyable mystery stories. George will share some of the interesting things about his life and his books that he has written in tomorrow's Coffee with a Neighbor presentation, entitled After Your Memoirs. He visits with Teri Kollath today to give us a preview of what's in store.
Hello, I'm Teri Kollath, and I'm here today with George Haines of Lakewood. We're talking about Coffee with a Neighbor. This special program is going to take you beyond your memoirs. Thanks for joining me, George.
Yes, it's a pleasure. Yes.
Well, when I found out that you wrote these interesting books, I wanted to know more about it. And to find out that they came from memoirs is it's fabulous because so many people are writing their memoirs.
Right.
So when did you start writing your memoirs?
Well, when I was a career teacher, and after I retired, then I finally had time to dwell into some of this information that I had gathered. And I was, thinking about my childhood. I was born in a 2-story frame house, working farm back in Indiana. And there were 3 bedrooms upstairs. And as you went up the stairs, to the right was my bedroom, straight ahead was my sister's. On the left was a spare bedroom that was a catch-all. And in that room, there was some very interesting items, an old brass bed, leftover clothes, junk, and so forth. But as a kid, I was very interested in an item at the foot of that brass bed, and it was a trunk. Years later, my dad passed away. I inherited the trunk.
Oh my gosh.
But I was teaching. I still didn't have a lot of time. After I retired, I had time to get into that trunk. The first thing I found in there was this. This is a World War I helmet, and my dad was in World War I. Underneath this was all his complete uniform, all the way down to the shoes, but underneath that were hundreds of letters, newspaper clippings, and so forth, and all the letters were written to my dad, and they were love letters, written by his friends clear back in about 1915, long in that sometime. And then I found out, well, that's why he didn't want me into that trunk. Yeah, it had some pretty revealing information. I mean, these letters were hot. So that started me on my memoirs. Okay. And as I wrote my memoirs, then I got into some very interesting situations, one of which was when I was about 10 or 11 years old. I had a cousin who lived in Ohio. He would come out, he and his family, twice a year, Christmas and in the summertime, on a farm back in the 30s, you had nobody to play with. When he came, it was really exciting. I said, his name was Howard, and I call him Howie. I said, Howie, let's go exploring. So across the road from our house was an old log cabin that my great-grandparents had built in the 1840s, still there. We walked inside, and against the complete front wall was this enormous fireplace. And we were standing there, and all of a sudden, the floor dropped out, and we fell down into sort of a pit. And it was kind of dark down there. I said, Howie, get out your flashlight. And we started flashing around, and it was a tunnel. There was a tunnel that went out this way underneath that log cabin. Howie, what is that right there? And he flashed his light on there, and it was a skeleton.
Oh my God.
A skeleton. And the skeleton was sort of slouched down, and hands were kind of out like this, and in his left hand was this enormous horseshoe. I said, Howie, look at that horseshoe. We reached out and we grabbed the horseshoe, dusted it off a little bit, and we could see some symbols on the horseshoe. And that's what led it into this book, The Mystery of the Giant Horseshoe. So what I'd like our listeners to understand, that you can take real situations, blend it into fiction, so that the audience can hardly tell the difference. Now you could tell, couldn't you, when I ended the real life stuff and got into the fiction?
It's hard to tell because I was so enthralled in your story. And everybody will be when they come.
Yeah.
Are you going to continue with more details about the story in your presentation?
Yes, I will.
And also the path you took to turn your story into books.
And it's interesting, in the memoirs, it doesn't matter whether you're interested in writing, whether you're an artist, whether you're a musician, whether you're whatever, it can lead into that type of an endeavor.
Fabulous.
And it's, even though, you don't do it for the, I don't do it for the money. I do it for the pleasure of writing.
What did you teach?
I taught science. Yeah,
Science. Okay, so you were always inquisitive.
Yeah,
and trying to figure out what was going on with things.
Yeah.
And that's probably going to come through in these books, which I can't wait to read.
That book is for 10 and 11-year-olds. That's because of two characters, Sam and Howie. Howie, my cousin, myself is Sam. We were 10 and 11 during that book.
Fabulous.
And then at the end, of course, there's always another mystery coming up. So the next one is when we're 12 and 13.
That's wonderful. I can't wait till you get to your retirement years at Shell Point. That's going to be fabulous. Well, you will want to come and get to know George Haines a little bit more as he reveals how he went from his memoirs to something else. Join us.
Istanbul, where East meets West. That's the name of tomorrow's Academy class with Professor Adrian Kerr in the Grand Cypress Room. The city of Istanbul is the largest city in Turkey, constituting the country's economic, cultural, and historical heart. Its rise to prominence and its great buildings, both Christian and Muslim, are not very well known in the West. But one who does know is our good old professor. He visits with Keri Kollath now to give us a preview of his class on Istanbul.
Hello, I'm Teri Kollath, manager of the Academy of Lifelong Learning. I'm here with Professor Adrian Kerr, and he has come up with a brand new class for us, and it's going to be looking at Istanbul. Thanks for joining me, Adrian.
Thank you, Teri. It's always a pleasure to be at Shell Point.
Now, you have created this course, Istanbul, where East meets West. Even the title sounds fabulous. But what is it about Istanbul that makes you return every single year?
It's a good question, Teri. I really have a great love of this city, partly based on history, partly based on the culture of the people, and also of the wonderful buildings that are there, which span over 2,000 years of history. So it's a place where you can go to see a modern East meets West, because that's where Asia starts, east of the Bosphorus. But you can also get a feel for how the city grew up. And of course, it goes back to Greek times. Byzantion was the name of the Greek trading post on the north of the Golden Horn. And then it all really moved into top gear when Constantine, the first emperor who prevented Christians from being persecuted, he'd moved his capital from Old Rome to what he called New Rome, and it only became known as Constantinople after he died. It was called New Rome for his period. He realized that the future for Rome, he was very far-sighted because it was 100 or 200 years later before this came to pass. The city was given a devastating blow when Venice decided that they would like to extend their maritime influence and took the opportunity in the Fourth Crusade to actually attack Constantinople and raid it. And for 60 years they ran Constantinople. Then they left, and then the folks came back to run Byzantium, or the Byzantine Empire. But it was never the same again. A lot of the artifacts were taken, the bronze horses were taken to Venice, etc. And it was really weakened to the point where when Mehmet the Conqueror came along, the Ottoman Sultan, around about 1400, he was using Hungarian Christian guns, the best in the world, and made a hole in the walls, poured in, and then he came to the great Hagia Sophia, which was the finest example of Roman Christian cathedral buildings. He was so impressed that he converted it into a mosque, and it survived, and now it's a museum. He added 4 minarets, and that's the reason why it's still standing today.
Interesting. Well, we hope you'll join us. Istanbul, where East meets West, right through to today.
The Shell Point Call Center begins their 5-year anniversary today of being in operation 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The call center's supervisor, Keri Perkins, will give us an inside, close-up look at what takes place in the call center and how they provide an invaluable service to Shell Point. There's a lot more than just answering phone calls that happens there, as we will find out in this next segment.
Make sure security knows to bring the ambulance to him, please.
What's going on?
911 is on their way, you guys. Island Gate, I need you to bring the ambulance when they get here, please.
10-4.
We get called for everything first. Hi, I'm Keri Perkins, call center supervisor, and I wanted to give you a tour of the call center today. We're coming up on our 5 years of being open 24/7, so I wanted to show you around. These are the ladies that answer the phone when you call 454-2190. The one call does it all. And what we do is make work orders and answer the phone calls. Typically, we get about 152,000 phone calls every year, and we make about 47,000 work orders a year. We get all different calls from work orders, housekeeping, security, and we do a lot of transferring and after-hours calls as well. Another thing we do up here is the e-call system, which is the nurse call in your apartment. If you have an emergency, you can pull the string and it calls us up here, and then we'll call you to see if you need any assistance. From there, we'll send security or a nurse, depending on what you need. Speaking of security, we also monitor all of the cameras here at Shell Point. They're at all of the entry and exit gates at all of the different communities. And because of the barcode stickers on all the vehicles, we can see who it is, when they enter and when they exit. So we like to provide that extra security here at Shell Point. We have everything from the license plate cameras. We can see when vendors are coming and going. And we also have thermal cameras out at the Eagles Preserve Golf Course, which actually sends us alarms overnight if there appears to be anyone that shouldn't be out there at certain times. Being 24/7, all of the shifts that we have are very, very different. Obviously, during the day, it's the busiest. When all of the staff is here, we get the most phone calls as well from other employees. Being here almost 8 years, I've worked all of the shifts that we have. So overnight is probably the least interesting. It's very slow, it's very quiet. The call center primarily handles all work orders, but we also handle everything from special service scheduling, carpet cleanings. We handle the morning assurance program. A lot of the residents are on that program. We rent out the lockers in the tunnel, extra storage. We handle barcodes. We handle different gate access. For example, if you live on the island, but you attend a weekly class at the Eagles Preserve Fitness Center, you can call us and we can adjust your barcode so you have access to the Eagles Preserve, so it's easier for you to get into your class. After hours, we get all the phone calls from Shell Point. So basically at 4:30, when administration, the medical center, and things like that close down, the calls get forwarded to us. So we did that kind of for a customer service reason, to make sure that any family members that are calling after hours get a live voice, and we can try and touch base with, say, the pavilion or arbor, wherever the resident may be, and ensure that they get in touch with their family members. We help other departments frequently with different paperwork and mailings and things like that. We do comings and goings here in the call center. That is a big thing that we do. So if a resident is going away for an extended period of time, we ask that you fill out a comings and goings form. We enter it in the system, and this way we know you're away and when you'll be back, and we ensure to check your unit while you're gone, just to make sure there's no leaks, floods, anything like that. One thing we also handle here in the call center is parking for all of Shell Point. Everything is assigned parking space for the vehicles and golf carts, so if you have any questions about that, you can give us a call. I, in particular, handle all the parking spaces, so just ask for me. We have currently 13 employees in the call center. We have 5 full-time, 3 part-time, and the rest are on call. We're known as the one call does it all, so if you have any questions at all, give us a call 24/7 and we will help you out.
And now it's time to cover all of Monday's happenings, Academy news, venues, and Village Church connections, right after this Listening to the Words preview from David Howenstein.
After last week's 4th of July Listening to the Words program on Shell Point Channel 12, this week we take off on a trip through some special American houses with time out to wave our grand old flag. First, you'll learn some history about our White House and test yourself on some White House trivia. Next, are there rules against wearing Stars and Stripes t-shirts? Have you ever visited a house that talked back to you? You will in this week's program. Go with a man who returns to a house that contains the thing its inhabitant most valued in the world. Also, share the familiar neighborhood sounds that remind a Fort Myers man of his hometown in Wisconsin. Finally, go back 70 years to enjoy the first grade with the same David Howenstein who reminds you that you can hear this program on Shell Point's Channel 12 at the top and again at the bottom of each hour every day this week, with a new program starting each Monday. And thank you for listening to the words.
Hello and welcome to the Happening segment of Shell Point TV. I'm Bev Chandley.
And I'm Caitlin Vanscoy.
And we're here to tell you the activities that we offer for you here today at Shell Point. We're going to start today with 8 o'clock men's round robin tennis down at the Woodlands. Also at 8 o'clock we have the mobile mammography van at the Village Church. They'll be there from 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock. At 8:45 you'll find virtual bowling at the Resident Activity Center. Billiards also will be played at the Resident Activity Center at 9:15. And we have a 9:15 Lollygaggers Paddlers outing. They're meeting at the kayak storage facility. And our last 9:15 activity is pottery, with instruction available down in the pottery studio. We're going to move to 10 o'clock for the men's match play tennis down at the Woodlands. Our Suzy Q boat heads to Matanzas on the Bay at 10 o'clock. We have a Health Connections class at 10:15, Brain Boot Camp. That'll be in the Social Center. And we have the Parkinson's Enrichment Group at the Community Room of King's Crown at 10:15. 10:30 is the time for the Disciple Men's Bible Study Group to gather in the game room of the Woodlands. At 10:45 we'll have table tennis. This is a playing clinic. That'll be down in the Island Tunnel. We have a Health Connections class at 11:30, Agility, Balance, and Flexibility. That'll be in the tarpon room that is currently full. Now here's Miss Caitlin to tell you what's going on this afternoon.
Thank you, Bev. We start at 12 o'clock with Mahjong at the Cove in the estuary. And at 12:45 we have a Health Connections class, Zumba Fitness, in the tarpon room. Samba the card game will be played at 1:15 at the Resident Activity Center. And then we move to 1:45 for Balance and Mobility, Advanced. That's in the tarpon room, and sign up is required. Pilates Stretch, that's a Health Connections class, will be held at 3 o'clock in the tarpon room. And 5 o'clock is the time for the singles table. That'll be available at the Crystal Dining Room. 6:30 is the time for beginner square dancing in the tarpon room. And duplicate bridge will be played in the game room of the Woodlands at 6:30. Our last Monday activity is square dancing at 7:30 in the Tarpon Room. Well, thank you so much for joining us here today. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.
Hi, I'm Teri Kollath with your Academy information for Monday, July 11th. At 10 o'clock, we have a Legacy Seminar number 3. This is an introduction to the Legacy Foundation at Shell Point, taking place in the Grand Cypress Room of the Woodlands. At 10:15, we have iPad calendar in the Manatee Room on the island, and sign-up is required. At 10:30, Anatomy of Words gathers again in the Oak Room of the Woodlands, and they welcome everyone. Mahjong Defense and Strategies will hold their makeup class in the Country Kitchen of the Arbor. We have a couple new classes coming up tomorrow. The first is Coffee with a Neighbor number 1, and it is after your memoirs with George Haines of Lakewood. Penny Modrich of Nautilus will also be teaching iPad contacts. And Istanbul, where East meets West, will be presented by Professor Adrian Kerr. What an opportunity to learn the history behind current events.
Menus for Monday, July the 11th. In the Crystal Room, the platter is Italian sausage, cheese tortellini, and broccoli. The soup is chicken gumbo. For dinner, it's Old Home Cooking Night for $13.95. In the Island Cafe, the special is a chicken club sandwich with side salad. The Palm Grill is closed on Mondays. All menus are available 24 hours a day at www.shellpoint.net.
Welcome to Village Church Connections. I'm David Pavey. Some time ago, I heard Tony Campolo, the Christian sociologist and preacher, tell a story that intrigued me. So enjoy it with me now. One day, Tony was invited to speak at a Pentecostal college chapel service. Before the service, however, 8 men took Tony to a back room of the chapel, had him kneel, laid their hands on his head, and began to pray. Now, that's a good thing, Tony admitted, except that they prayed a long time. And the longer they prayed, the more tired they got. And the more tired they got, the more they leaned on my head. And I want to tell you that when you got 8 guys leaning on your head, it doesn't feel so good. To make matters worse, one of the men wasn't even praying for me. He went on and on, praying for somebody named Charlie Stoltzfus. Dear Lord, you know Charlie Stoltzfus. He lives in the silver trailer down the road a mile. You know the trailer, Lord, just down the road on the right-hand side. As if it was necessary to furnish God with directional material. Lord, Charlie told me this morning. He said he's going to leave his wife and 3 kids. Step in and do something, oh God. Bring that family back together. Tony finally got the Pentecostal preachers off his head, delivered his message to the students, and got in his car to drive home. As he drove onto the Pennsylvania Turnpike, however, Tony noticed a hitchhiker, so he picked him up. I'll let him continue the story. We drove a few minutes and I said, "Hi, my name's Tony Campolo. What's yours?" "My name is Charlie Stoltzfus," he said. I couldn't believe it. I got off the turnpike at the next exit and headed back. Charlie Stoltzfus got a bit uneasy with that, and after a few minutes he said, "Hey, mister, where are you taking me?" I said, "I'm taking you home." He narrowed his eyes and he asked, "Why?" I said, "Because you just left your wife and 3 kids, right?" That blew him away. Yeah, that's right. And with shock written all over his face, he plastered himself against the car door and never took his eyes off me. Then I really did him in, as I drove right to his silver trailer. When I pulled up, his eyes seemed to bulge as he asked, "How did you know that I lived here?" I said, "God told me." When he opened the trailer door, his wife exclaimed, "You're back, you're back." He whispered in her ear, and the more he talked, the bigger her eyes got. Then I said with real authority, "The 2 of you sit down. I'm going to talk to you, and you 2 are going to listen." Man, did they listen. That afternoon, I led those 2 young people to Jesus Christ. Well, that's the story. But as I reflected on it, I realized that God had uniquely prepared Tony to minister to the Charlie Stoltzfus family. He does things like that. For example, the Bible tells the story of how God prepared the Apostle Peter to go from Joppa, 40 miles north, to Caesarea to evangelize a Roman army officer named Cornelius, who was a captain of the Italian regiment. God gave Peter a vision of something like a large sheet let down from the sky by its 4 corners, and in the sheet were all sorts of animals, reptiles, and birds. And then a voice said to him, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat them." "Well, no, Lord," Peter declared. "I've never eaten anything that our Jewish laws have declared impure and unclean." But the voice spoke again, "Do not call something unclean if God has made it clean." The same vision was repeated 3 times. The Holy Spirit said to him, "3 men have come looking for you. Get up, go downstairs and go with them." So Peter went with them, and when they arrived in Caesarea, Cornelius was waiting for them with his relatives and friends. Peter entered his Gentile home, something he would never have thought of doing before God had prepared him by giving him that vision. Peter told them, "You know it's against our laws for a Jewish man to enter a Gentile home like this, or to associate with you, but God has shown me that I should no longer think of anyone as unclean." And then Peter explained, "I see very clearly that God shows no favoritism. In every nation he accepts those who fear him. This is the message of good news, that there is peace with God through Jesus Christ. Everyone who believes in him will have their sins forgiven through his name." Cornelius the centurion, with his relatives and friends, became Christians through the witness of Peter, whom God had prepared to break with tradition. You'll find the full story in the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 10 in the Bible. As you think about how God prepared Tony Campolo to minister to Charlie Stoltzfus, and how he prepared the Apostle Peter to minister to Cornelius, think about how God might have prepared you to serve somebody today in your sphere of influence, with a word of encouragement, comfort, challenge, forgiveness, or perhaps a kind deed. Maybe, without realizing it, your experience or education or family situation or health history has uniquely prepared you to bless somebody today. I wonder who that person will be. And thank you once again for tuning in to Village Church Connections.
Thanks for joining us for today's program. Join us again tomorrow when we'll learn more about this week's summer concert with Ethan Uslan. And we'll learn about living well with knee osteoarthritis. Until then, this has been Shell Point Today for Monday, July 11th. I'm Dan Philgreen, and from all of us here at SBTV, we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you back here again tomorrow.